everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we'll be creating this product sales analysis report, and in this video we'll extensively create dimension tables from a single table. We'll create dynamic date tables in Power Query. Of course, we are going to model this data, create relationships, and go ahead to analyze the data by building this beautiful report you're seeing on your screen right now. So first off, I'm going to import my data from Excel. This data set was gotten from FP Challenge Product Sales Analysis. So I'm going to select import data from Excel. And right here, I'm going to select the Excel file and then click to open it. I click to open, in few seconds this navigator dialog box shows, and then I'm going to select the spot product table. So like I said, it's a single Excel table, and I'm just going to click transform data to open up our Power Query editor. Yeah, our Power Query editor has opened, and this is the table we've imported from Excel. So I'm just going to scan to check that the data types are actually correct. So I'll just scroll through, and here I see some columns like price per unit. If I click this column now, you can see that this 1.2 is a decimal number. This is a decimal number data type. I would always suggest, if you have decimal number data type in your data, always make sure to change it to fixed decimal number, because that's going to improve the performance of your queries and of course your report. So what I'm going to do, I'll select all the columns that have this decimal number data type by pressing Ctrl. I'll just select all of them so I can change them all at once. Then I'm going to click on that data type symbol and then select fixed decimal. I'll select replace current. So by doing that, it's going to replace the decimal number data type with fixed decimal number. Okay, and this is what we have, and of course the other data types are actually correct. So that is it for our fact table. So we have to create dimension tables from this single data set. Normally fact table contains data that you need to analyze, while dimension tables will only contain information or descriptive information about the data in your fact table. So what we're going to do is to quickly duplicate this query. So we're going to duplicate it into 4 query because we need to create 4 dimension tables. So I'm just going to right click and select duplicate. I'll just keep duplicating it. Let me just duplicate up to 4. Then we start to create the dimension tables. So right now we have all this table available here. So for the second query now, I'm going to select it. We want to create a product dimension table right now. So what we'll do, right on the home tab, you come over to where you have manage columns and select choose columns. I'm going to select the choose columns, and I'll unselect all the columns here and select the product column, because that is the only column that relates to the table we're about to create. So right on this product column, I'm going to right click and then select remove duplicate. That is going to remove the duplicate. So we also need to create a product ID column for this particular table. What we will have to do is to click on the add column tab and then select the index column. So index column has different options. If you want your table to start counting from 0, if you want it to start counting from 1, or you want to set a custom index column. So right now I want my index column, I want my product ID column to start counting from 1. So I'm going to select 1. And once I select 1, you see I have a product ID column. I'm just going to reorder this particular column and then double click to change the name. So I'm going to change it to product ID. Okay, so once I change it to product ID, here we have a new product dimension table. I'll quickly double click this query to change it to, I'm going to add this prefix dim. That dim just basically stands for dimension. So I'm going to type dim underscore product. So we have our product table right here. This next query, we want to create a retailer ID table. In order for us to do that, I'll come back to home tab and go over to choose columns and then select choose columns. So we're going to unselect all these columns and I'll select retailer ID and retailer. Those are the two columns that we need for this particular table. So right here we've reduced the columns to retailer and retailer ID. So the column we need to remove duplicates from is the retailer ID, because that contains the unique key for each of the retailers in this particular table. So I'm just going to remove duplicate. Once I remove duplicates, you can see that it has reduced to about 6 retailers. I'll quickly just reorder this column, and there we've created our retailer table. Very easy. So I'm going to double click this and create our dimension table. So I'm going to type dim retailer. So that is it for our retailer table. The next table we are going to create from this same data set is going to be our region table. So for the region table, we'll just go back to, under home tab, we'll just go back to manage columns and select choose column. Once I select choose column, I'm going to unselect, just the same process like the other one. So for here, we're going to select region, state, and city. So once I select that, I'm going to tick OK. So right now, this one is a bit tricky because we have 3 different columns. So when you have columns like this or tables like this that you want to create, you have to know the particular column, especially if you are extracting it from your facts table. You have to know which column to remove duplicates from. So right now we see that there are several regions here. We have like about 5 regions in this data set. If I click, you see that we have few regions in this data set. So each state, there are more than one state actually belongs to a region, but only one city belongs to a state. So that means we have to remove duplicates from the city column. So if I come here, I'm just going to right click and remove duplicates from this city column. So this is going to give us unique cities for each state, and of course different states belong to different regions. So the next thing I'm going to do is just to add a region ID column. So we're just going to do that by adding our index column. So adding this index column, I'm going to reorder it and drop it in the first column. So we're going to call this region ID. Let's call this region ID. Okay, so right now we have our region ID column. We have our region ID column, and we have a region dimension table, of which I'll quickly double click there to rename the table. We'll call it region. And that is it. So for the last one, we're going to create a table for our sales method column. So right here, I'll quickly go back to the home tab, come over to choose column, just basically the same process, because we have to reduce those columns that we don't need in a particular table. I'm going to unselect these and then select sales method. So I'll click OK, and sales method, we have only one column that relates to this table. So we're going to remove duplicates. After removing duplicates, I'm going to select to add index column to this particular table. So I'll call this sales method ID. Then I'll press enter. Then right here on this query, I'm going to rename it to, let's call it sales channel. Right now, we are actually done with creating our dimension tables. And if you look at it, you can see that each table have its unique columns. The next thing we are going to do after creating these dimension tables is for us to merge these columns together with our facts table. The essence of merging these tables, these queries together, is so that we can get each of the table IDs into, which are unique keys, into the facts table. This is what we are going to use to create relationships when we get over to data modeling. So what we'll have to do is I'll click on this facts table here, and then I'll come over to home tab and come over to combine. So here we're going to combine these queries. So under combine queries, you can combine the queries together into one single table, or you can create a new merge queries as well. So right now I'm just going to select merge queries. So in this merge queries, I'm going to start by merging our product table first. So I'm going to select dim product, and I'm going to select the product column. Then over here in the sports products facts table, I'm going to select that, and of course the rows match each other. I'm going to select Just note the rows that matches each other. The rows are 9,644. That means we have 9,644 rows originally in the data set. So after your merge, make sure that the rows are equally the same, because you are extracting these dimension tables from the original data set. So I'm just going to select OK. So once I select OK, I'll just keep merging. I'll just merge because I want to merge all the queries together. So what I'll do, I'm going to merge the region table. So for this region table, I'm going to select the city. Remember, it is the city that we remove duplicates from, so we have to merge from the city. I'm going to select city, and then I'll just click OK. Then the next one I'm going to merge, I'll click back on merge queries. Then the next table I'm going to merge is the sales channel. So right on this sales channel, I'm going to select the sales method, and I'll scroll down here and also select this sales method. Once I select this sales method, I'm going to click OK. So for the retailer table, we're not going to merge it because in the original data set we already have retailer ID and the retailers itself, so we are not going to merge it any longer, but we are going to reduce the rows that we need available in this particular table. So what we're going to do for these three tables that I have made here, I'll first of all come to the product dimension table. I'll click on this place to actually expand. Then I'm going to unselect all these columns. Right now, the only thing I need here is the product ID column. So this is like a left join, this particular merge, because it's going to keep all the information from the original table, which is the facts table, and only bring in matching information from the product table, which is the product ID. I'm going to unselect this and then click OK. Once I click OK, you can see we have our product ID right here. And of course, for the region table, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to unselect. The only thing we need to bring in is region ID, because we have region, state, and city in this particular table. So I'm going to bring in region ID right here. And for the sales channel, I'm going to also expand it and also bring in the sales method ID. I'm going to click OK. So once I expand and bring in these different columns, what I'm going to do, I'll select the three columns together and then reorder them. I just want to reorder the three columns. So I'm going to place it right here. So these are the three columns that we've expanded. The next thing we're going to do right away is to remove columns that we no longer need in the facts table. This is because we've brought in unique keys that we would use to create relationships to the dimension tables. So I'll just come back to choose column. And under choose column, I'm going to unselect some columns that we don't need. I'm going to unselect columns that we don't need. So right now we will no longer need the retailer column, and of course we will no longer need region, state, city, and product. That is because we already have product ID, region ID, even sales method ID. So we are going to remove the sales method as well. So these are the other information that we need in this particular table. I'm going to click OK. So remember, I mentioned that after merging your table, you should make sure that the rows are still the same, especially if you're extracting those data from a single data set. So in order for us to do that, I'll have to preview this column. So I'll come over to the View tab and then click on Column Profile. This is going to show me statistics about this particular table. So I'm just going to click on Column Profile and okay, first off, let me reorder this date. So right there, I'm going to select this and select the column profile. So it's showing me this column count as 1000. This is because when you bring in data into Power Query initially, it will show you down here that the column profiling is based on top 1000 rows. So if you want this column profiling to show for the entire data set, you just click on it and select the second option, profiling based on the entire data set. So right now in my column I have, so right now in this particular table we still have 9,644 rows after the merge. So if you're following up with this particular tutorial, also make sure that your rows are the same as it was. Okay, so that's that for our column profile, and I'm going to remove that. So our data is ready, but we also need to do something. So right here we're going to create a right now we're going to create a dynamic date table in Power Query. Of course, you know that you can create date tables with DAX. You can also bring in date table with your source data, or you use the auto time intelligence provided by Power BI. But right here, we're going to just create a dynamic date table in Power Query. So what we're going to do is I'll click on Home tab. Back on this Home tab, I'm going to select Manage Parameters. We want to create new parameter. So parameter is just going to help dynamically change the dates that we're going to feed into this particular table. Parameter I'm going to create is called Start Date. So I'll select the data type as date and the current value. The current value of my start date is the first date on this my data set. So this data set contains, so this data set is data set for 2 years, 2020 and 2021. So my current value will be 2020 0101. Of course, that basically stands for January 1st 2020. So I'm going to just click and create another parameter. So the second parameter now is going to be called end date. That's the last date for this particular data. So I'll call it end date, and then I'll change the type to date, and of course the value is going to be 2021, and so this is going to be 31st of December 2021. So I'll quickly just click OK. After creating these two parameters, I'm going to click OK. So right now you can see our two parameters on the queries pane. The next thing we are going to do is to right click and create a new query. So under this new query, I'll scroll down to select blank query. So on this blank query, we're going to use Power Query AIM language to create this particular table. So what we'll do is to first of all start with our equal to sign, and I'm going to type list.date. So as you're typing, this IntelliSense is going to show, so you can scroll down to select the function you want to use, or you can go ahead and just type if you know the function that you're about to use. So with list.date, I'm going to open this particular parenthesis, and once I open that, the first argument here is the start date. So we're going to use our start date parameter that we just created. Okay, and the second here is count as number. So this count as number is just going to cover for the years in this data set. This data set contains 2 years. So what we're going to do is we're going to use duration.days. So for this duration.days, we're going to type end date. So the end date, of course, is the second parameter that we created, and we're going to subtract it from our start date. It will come out from there and add it to 1, that is +1. Then we'll put a comma sign. So this particular function covers for the second argument here, which is count as number. Then the duration, which is the third argument, I'm going to just type hash and type duration. So I'll put a bracket and then type 10, 0, 0. So this 10, this duration basically says 1 day, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. That is how the formula is. And with this, I'm going to press enter. So if I press enter, let's see what it gives us. So this has given us a list of dates that covers from 1st January 2020 to 31st December 2021. So in order to convert this to a table, we are going to come to this point and select convert to table. So I'm just going to click OK. So this has converted this data to a table. I'll quickly rename this column. To a date column. And then of course I'll also change this data type to date data type. Okay, so that is what we're going to do. I can also preview this particular column. So let me select column profile. So this column has 731 days. So you know that this is correct because the days between 1st of January 2021 and 31st of December 2020, 1st of January 2020 and 31st of December 2021 is 731 days. Okay, so that is basically that. I'm going to turn off the column profile, and right here on this particular date table we have to create columns for this date table. How do we go about it? We have to start adding columns to it. So first off, we're going to go to add column and select on the date table itself, go to add column, and here you see from date and time. So we're going to select this and select year. So I'm going to add the year from this particular column, and the next one we're going to add is the quarter. So I'll come over here and select for quarter of year. Okay, so that is for quarter of year. And the next column we're going to create is the quarter. We want to create quarter as a text data type. That is quarter Q1, Q2, Q3 to cover for the 4 quarters of a year. But we are not going to do that directly from this particular date options that we have here. What we're going to do is we are going to use a custom column to create this. So I'm going to type quarter. So we're going to use an if statement. So I'll just type if date dot month. So you know quarters are count by months. The first month, second month, and the third month are in quarter 1. So we're going to use, that's why we're using a date dot month. So I'm going to type if date dot month. I'll put a bracket and then select this date column, because we want to extract the month from the date column and use it to create quarter. So if date dot month, I'll close the bracket, is less than or equal to 3, then it should be quarter 1. So I'll put double quotes there and then type quarter 1. Then I'll go to the next line and then say else if. So basically I'm just going to copy this first line of code so I don't have to type everything all over again. I'll just copy it and then paste it here. So for this second one, I'm going to say if date dot month is less than or equal to 6, it should be quarter 2. So I'm just going to effect those changes, go to the next line and type else, and then paste that particular line of code again and say if date dot month is less than and equal to 9, then it should be quarter 3. Then I'll also do the same thing for the last quarter. So this one would be if date dot month is less than or equal to 12, it should be quarter 4. Then of course, closing the if statement, there will always be an else in case there is any other month that surpasses that. But basically this is how you're going to create a quarter column from your date table. So this covers for quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. So right here I'm just going to click on OK. Once I click OK, you can see that we have the different quarter, and I'm just going to change this data type quickly to text. So the next column we are going to create is the month column. So for the month column, I'll select the date column rather, and then select date, and then select the month. So we now have the month, and the next thing we're going to create is the month name. So right here, if I select date and go over to date, we have month name here, which is name of month. But the only thing is that this month name comes in full, and I don't want to create full month name for my data set. You can do that if you wish. I want to use the first 3 abbreviation, the first 3 letters of the month. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a custom column as well. So I'll just click on custom column, and with this custom column I'm going to give it a name as month name. Then in the custom column formula, what I'm going to type is, I'll just type each, let's say date to text. I'm just going to type this and open the bracket. So after opening this bracket, I'm going to insert this particular date. So I'll insert the date and put a comma. Then we are going to format the month. So the formatting, I'm going to type the 3 M's and then close this particular bracket. So this is what is going to extract the month for us. So after doing that, I'll just click OK. So right now you see that we have our month name, but the first 3 letters of the month name. So I'm going to change this to text because of course that's a text data type. The next column we're going to create is to create the day from this date. So I'll quickly come over here under add column. I'll come back to this date and then select the day. So this is going to be day of week. So I'm going to select day of week. Then right here, I also want to create day name. So the same thing we did for the month name, would also do it for day name. Power Query has an option, but the day name comes in full. But here, I want to format it as the first 3 letters of the day name. So I'm quickly going to select the date, create this custom column. And with this custom column, I'll change this to day name. I'll change this to day name and then use the formula. I'll just type dates dot to text, open the bracket and then insert that date column. Then I'll put a comma and then put double quotes and format this date column. I'll close the bracket. Once I close the bracket, I'm going to press OK. So once I press OK, you can see we have the first 3 letters of our day name. I'll also change this to a text data type. So we have a date table right here in Power Query. What I am going to do is to quickly double click here and change this name to Beam Dates or Dim Calendar, as the case may be. So of course this is our date table right here. I'm going to press enter. So for now, we are done with most of the things we need to do in Power Query. We've created our dimension tables. We have our new facts table. I call it new because we've actually reduced some columns that are not needed in this particular facts table. And of course, we have a calendar table. If we need to transform any other thing in Power Query, we can always come back to it. But right now, I'm just going to click on the Home tab and then select Close and Apply. So we've imported our data from Power Query into Power BI. So quickly, another tip on how to improve your report performance. You know you've created a date table because you have a date column in your data set. So you can quickly come to your File tab, or sometimes you can even do it before you start your project. That's very okay. Do it before you start your project. So under Options and Settings, you're going to select that, click on Options. And then on this current report, I'm going to go over to my current file. So for my current file, data load, I want to turn off the auto date and time. So once I turn off the auto, you can do it for the global. If you select for global and change for global, that means subsequent data sets that you bring in, subsequent data sets that you import into your Power BI would no longer have that auto date and time. So this auto date and time is not a physical table. It's just an option that Power BI gives you. That's why sometimes if you don't create date table for your data set, you already have a date hierarchy which you can use to analyze your data. So right here on this current file, I'll select data load, then I'll unselect this time intelligence. Right here, I'm just going to click OK. So it's important to do that because this will also help improve the performance of your report, because you've already created a date table. So you don't want to have hidden tables that anytime you're trying to refresh or reload your report, everything will just be refreshing and reloading, and of course that can heavily impact the performance. So always make sure to turn that off if you have a date table that you want to use. So the next thing we're going to do quickly is to click on table view. So table view is for us to preview the tables that we have in our data set. So right now on my sports product facts table, this is our table view. So I'm just going to preview some of this table, and I can see some currency. So this particular data set has a dollar currency. I'm just going to select this total sales and select it the currency to dollar. Okay, so I'm just going to change it and also do the same for operating margin. So for this operating margin, we want to change it to percentage. So I'll just quickly change it to percentage, and I don't want it to have any decimal number for the operating margin. So basically, this is what our data set looks like. You now see our sales method ID, product ID, region ID, and every other thing in that particular table. So I'm going to close this and click on the sales channel. So our sales channel imported successfully. So we're going to just preview this, and then before we go ahead to model this particular data. So right here on the calendar table, I'm just going to click here to mark as date table. So once I click that, I'm going to select this mark as date table and choose the date column. Then I'll click to save. So this is going to mark this as our official date table that we want to use in performing this analysis. So right here, I'll quickly come to the month name. I'll select it. I just want to sort all these columns before we start creating our report. So I'm going to sort the month name with the month number, which is the month here. And of course, I'll do the same thing for the day name. I'm going to sort the day name with day of week. Yes, I'm going to sort the day name with day of week. And I'm also going to sort the quarter with the quarter number here. I'm sorting this by this. So basically, we've been able to effect the necessary changes that we need to in this particular table. So the next thing we're going to do is to open our model view. So on this model view, you see that Power BI has already created relationships for us between these tables. But most times when you have this is because you already have an auto detect relationship. If you turn it off in your options and settings, the same place we actually turn off auto time intelligence, no relationships will be created. But even at that, always check your model view to be sure that the relationships created are using the exact column or the correct column that you would want to use. So right here, if I hover on this relationship, I can see region and region ID. And if I hover on this too, I can see product and product ID. So if I also hover on this, I can see sales method ID, and I'm just confirming that those columns are correct. So right here, the calendar table, I've not created any relationship with this facts table yet. So what I'm going to do, I'll quickly select this and join it with the invoice date. So it's going to open this relationship dialog box, and it's a one-to-many relationship. From the one-to-many relationship is from the calendar table to the sports product facts table. So I'll basically just click OK. So once I click OK, we've created models for our data. So since we now have these relationships in our model view, if I click on this sports, on this model view, if I click on this facts table, this sports product table, you can see all the product IDs here. But since we already have this, we've created the relationship, so when we want to analyze our data, we will not have any issues. I can quickly just hide some of these columns. We don't want it to appear in our model view. So how do I do this? I'll first of all come to the facts table, and for each of these IDs, I'm going to hide them. So I'm just going to hide product ID, region ID. So I'm going to also hide the retailer ID. So I'll hide the retailer ID, okay, and also the sales method ID. So for this fact table, I'll equally hide the invoice date, because we have the invoice date in the calendar. So calendar table, any time intelligence calculation we want to perform, we'll use the date from our calendar table. Then I'll also go to the individual tables and also hide some of these their IDs. So for the sales channel, I'm going to hide the sales method ID. For the retailer channel, I'm going to hide the retailer ID. And of course, I'll do same thing for products and region ID. I'm just going to hide this, and I'm also going to hide this as well. So basically, this is what is showing. We've been able to hide some of the IDs here. So the IDs are still very much available because, of course, that's where we have our relationships, but it's not going to show in our report view. So I'm going to collapse all of this and then come over to our report view. So when I come over to our report view, if I click to expand this facts table, you can see that we don't have those IDs showing right here. We don't have any of those IDs showing here, but of course we don't have any of them showing here. So basically that is it. So the next thing we're going to do is to start creating our report. In order for us to start creating our report, I'm going to bring in a background I have created in PowerPoint. So I'll click on Canvas background. I might even give it a background color if I want to. Then I can bring in this particular background. So I'm going to use the first template for the first background and click to open it. So once I click, if you import any background into Power BI and the canvas is still showing white, that means your transparency is on. So just turn off your transparency and your background is going to show. So we're going to change this image fit from normal to fit. We want it to fit into this particular background. So this is the template I've created from PowerPoint already, and the first thing we're going to do with this template after bringing it in is to create our KPI. So normally when you have a particular data set, most times you start with the data summaries like the KPIs. Like now we're working with a product sales data set, so we are going to bring in the summaries like total sales, profit, and the rest of them. If you're working with HR data, you know you have to count employees, attrition rate, and all those other important metrics for the data set. So right here, we're just going to create measures. The first measure before we create the measure, under the Home tab, I'm going to click Enter Data. So with this Enter Data, we want to create a table for measures. It is always best that you create a separate measures table such that your measures are arranged in a particular table and is not scattered around all the table. It also helps for easy navigation as well. So we now have a measures table here. So I'm going to select that table. Any table that you want to create measures in, make sure you select it. So I'm going to select the measures table and click new measure. So our new measure here, the first one is going to be our total sales. So basically we are going to use our sum function. It's a simple function that we all know. So we're going to use sum function and then press enter. The next measure we'll quickly create is the profit measure. So I can call this total profits. So with this total profit, we're still going to use the sum function because we have a profit column already. So we don't need to create calculated columns or use an iterating function. So I'm going to use sum function and then press enter. Then we're going to create another one. So the other measure we're going to create is units sold. We have a units sold column right here. So I'm going to just create a measure for units sold. Let's call it units sold, yeah, because there are more than one unit. So I'm going to type sum function and then we're going to use the units sold. and press enter. So the next measure we are going to create is the total orders. So I'm going to select new measure and I'm going to type total orders. So for this total orders, I'm going to use a count. So I'm going to use a count and we're going to count our invoice date. So this invoice date is unique to each transaction. So that's why we want to count invoice date. We're not going to use distinct count because more than one transaction must have occurred in a day. So we're going to use count. I'm going to count this invoice date and close my bracket and then press enter. So we've created measures that we need as of now. When we need other measures as we are building the report, we are going to create them together. So right here we have this. So I'm just going to use this card visual. So I'm going to bring in this card visual right here and let me readjust it. So I just remembered something that I need to change as I was trying to readjust this card visual. Okay, so I remember I have not changed my canvas settings and I want to change it. So I'm just going to change this canvas setting. I want to give it a custom setting. So the height is going to be 180 and the width is going to be 1920. So this is the setting I want for my canvas. Okay, so I'll just bring back the card visual that I was trying to resize and just bring it here. So for this card visual, I'm going to add the different cards that I want to. Total profit, I'm going to add units sold, and I'm also going to add the total orders. So I'll change the layout of the card. So with this layout, I want it to be a single row, and since we are adding 4 measures, I'll change it to maximum of 4 cards shown. So right here, I'm just going to try and expand this to each of the space they are supposed to belong. But I'm seeing something about total sales. So right here, I'll quickly change these decimal numbers to 2. So that's why you have to also be checking those things so you don't have to go back and forth trying to change them. So I'm going to change this decimal number to 2 for the total sales measure. Then I'll do similar thing for total profit. I'm going to change the decimal number to 2 as well. So I'm going to try and place it right here, this card measure. So for this card, I'll quickly remove the background because we don't need the background. Then we'll go over to the label. So let me collapse this. Then I'll go to the callout values. So for the callout values, we want the callout values to have this particular color. So that's the color I want our callout values to have. And for the label, so the label is auto, but we want it to be below the value. So I'm going to change the position to keep it below the value. So I can quickly make it bold. Basically, I'm just trying to align these cards to fit into this particular background I brought in from Power BI. So from PowerPoint rather. So I'm going to select that. Once I select it, I'll quickly go to cards, and we want to turn off the border for this card and also the background for this card. So I'm going to turn off the border, turn off the background for this card, and this is what we have currently. So right now, I'm also seeing that the label, our total orders is 9,644. So we're going to come back to these callout values, and I'm going to specifically select total orders. So for these total orders, I'm going to select the values. So the values here, the units are displaying auto. So right here, I don't want any decimal place here. I'm going to type 0 in the value as decimal places, and under the display unit, I'm going to change it from automatic to none. So this is going to give us the exact total orders. We don't want our total orders to round up to 10,000. Of course, you can see the figure that is not exactly 10,000. So that is what we have at this point, and I'm just going to readjust this. You can see that we already have our card measure here and it looks okay. You can decide to rename the columns and maybe give it like capital letter. Let me do for the first one. So you can just decide to rename the columns there, and it's going to change how the columns are displayed right there. After creating our card measures, the next thing I'm going to create is a ribbon chart. So this ribbon chart, we want to actually analyze the sales by quarter and region. So I'll come over to build where I have my visualizations and click on ribbon chart. So this ribbon chart, I'll quickly just readjust it to this point. So once I readjust it, for the x-axis, my x-axis will contain my quarter. So let me bring it here from the calendar table. I'm going to bring in quarter from the calendar table into my x-axis, and my y-axis is going to carry the total sales. So from the measures table, I'll bring in the total sales, and of course my legend is going to have the region. So I'm going to bring in region here. Yes, my legend is going to have the region. So basically this is our sales by quarter and region. So we'll go ahead to just format this. So right now I want to sort my axis. I want to sort it by the total sales. So if I sort by the total sales, you can see that the quarter that has the highest sales will come first. So this is how I want to sort it. I'll come to my x-axis and remove the title. And of course I will come over to my legend. I want to bring the legend at the center, think bottom center. Yes, this is where I want to change the legend to. And for my y-axis, I'm going to remove the title of the y-axis. So we're just going to format this quickly. And for the grid lines, I don't want the grid lines to show, so I'm basically going to remove the grid lines from there. So for the title, I'll quickly change the title. I'll call it sales by quarter and region. I'll just say sales by quarter and region, or you just give it any other descriptive name. So I'm going to press enter. That is it for our title. So right here, I'm just going to scroll down. For these columns, I'm going to change some of the colors of the columns. There's one particular one I want to change. So from our legend, I can see the waist. I want to change the color for this waist, and I want to give it some other color. Okay, so that's the color I want to change for the waist. Then I'll go over to our ribbons. I'll scroll down, and I want to increase the transparency of this ribbon. I want to increase it to at least 81%. So this is basically how our ribbon should show. So back to the values here. For this x-axis value, you can increase it. Let's just increase it to 12 so that it can be more visible. And of course, we'll do the same thing for the y-axis. So for the values, we're just going to increase it to 12. So that is it for our ribbon chart. Okay, so one more thing we need to do is to turn off the background. We already have a white background there, so we don't want our ribbon charts to have an extra background. So I'm just going to resize this to this point. So the next chart we are going to create is the line chart. This chart is going to show us the monthly sales and profit for each of the months. So in order to create that line chart, I'm going to select this line chart. Let me place it here, but we are going to readjust it later. So right on this line chart, our x-axis will have the months. So I'm going to open the calendar table. Our x-axis is going to have the month name. Then our y-axis is going to have total sales. Total sales will come to our y-axis. And of course, we'll also add the total profits to our y-axis. Remember, we want to show the monthly sales and profits for each of the months. For this particular chart, I'm going to change the title. So we'll say monthly sales and profits. Monthly sales and profits, that's going to be the title for that particular chart. I'll scroll down to where I have the lines because I want to effect some changes in the lines. So I'll come over to the lines here, and then for this line style, I want to change it to, okay, the line style is solid, we need it that way. I'm looking for, okay, yes, the interpolation type of the line. I don't want it to be a linear line like this. I want it to be a smooth line. So this is how the smooth line is. So with this smooth line, you can change the the smooth type from monotone to cardinal. Okay, so this is basically how I want this line chart to be. And right here, I'll just go back to our x-axis. So let's go to our x-axis and turn off the title. We're going to turn off the title because the month name already tells you that this axis is for month. Then I'm also going to turn off for the y-axis. So I'm going to select the y-axis and then scroll down to turn off the title. So you can decide to add markers and data labels to your line chart based on your preference. So right here, I'm going to turn off the title for the legend. The legend itself is okay, so we don't need the title. So I'm going to turn off this legend title and we are done with our line chart. So right now, this line chart should be here. Okay, one more thing for the line chart, please. We're going to change the background. We're going to remove it. So this is our line chart. Let me readjust it to fit to the other chart. So this line chart should be here, but we want this line chart to be hidden when the ribbon chart is showing, and we also want the ribbon chart to be hidden when the line chart is showing. Okay, quickly, I think I need to expand the columns for our ribbon chart. So let me take it up a bit. So I'm going to select our ribbon charts. I'll come over to the columns for our ribbon chart. Right here in the column layout, spaces between category, I'm just going to reduce it. So you can reduce it to 50 or you just type 50%. So we just want the space to be at least 50%. So you can actually adjust it any other way. So I'm quickly going to bring our line chart here. We'll just place it directly on this particular chart. So what we'll do now is to create buttons for this line chart. I'm going to click on insert and then we are going to create some buttons. So I'm going to select this blank button. I'll bring the blank button down here. So this blank button, I'm going to, let me change the shape so we know. So that's the shape of the blank button. Okay, I want to change it to, I want the rounded corners to be up to 50% for the round button. So here I want the border to have a color, and this color is going to be this color. So I'll change the width to just 1%. So that is it for the first button. So for this first button, we're going to give it a name. Under button style, at its default state, we're going to give it a name. So the name for the first button is going to be quarter. So I'm going to select this and select quarter. So that is the name for this particular button. I can increase the size to 12. So we've created a button for quarter. The next thing I'm going to do is to duplicate this button. So once I duplicate this button, I'm going to change the name to month, because that's what we want to create next. I'm going to change the name to month. So I'm going to duplicate that quarter button, and this time around I will give that particular button a fill color. So this fill color is going to be this blue color, and the font color is going to be white. So I'm going to select white as the font color. I think there is a transparency in our fill color, so I'll quickly go back to turn off that transparency. So this is what I want the button to show. So I'm going to duplicate the month as well, and then for this month I'm also going to give it a fill color. So I'll select this and then select the blue color here, and then I'll scroll over to text to change the font color to white. Okay, we still have the same issue. I think the transparency is automatically added to this particular fill colors for buttons, so always make sure to check that. So after naming our buttons, we are going to create bookmarks for this button. So in order to create our bookmarks, I'm just going to select the bookmark pane and also the selection pane because we need it. So as I'm going to select the button, you can see that it's going to select that particular button on this visual for us. So this first button is the quarter button. So I'm going to name it quarter select. I'm going to name it quarter select. Okay, so these are just descriptive name I decide to give this button. So this second button is for the month. So I'm going to give it month on select. Month disable rather. Okay, yeah, the first button here is quarter disable. Like I said, it should be descriptive name so that you know what particular button stands for what. Okay, so quarter disable. Then this one is quarter enabled. Then I'm going to do the same thing here and call it months enabled. So we're done with changing the button names. We're going to add bookmarks now. So we're going to start by adding our bookmarks. So we'll add the months enabled bookmark. We'll add another bookmark to call it months disabled. So this is going to be months disabled or disabled. Then I'm going to add another one. This is going to be quarter enabled. So just give it descriptive name, and this is going to be quarter disabled. So with this bookmark now, we are going to try and format these particular buttons. Our month disabled button, we want it to take us to the month enabled. That means if we select the disabled button, it should show us the month that is enabled. And for our quarter disabled button, if we select it, we want it to show us the quarter that is enabled. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to try and format this. In order to format this, when the month is enabled, we want to see the month enabled button. We don't want to see the quarter enabled button, but we want to see the quarter disabled button, and we also don't want to see this. So those are the two things we want to see for the month enable. Okay, of course, for the month as well, we don't want to see the ribbon chart that we created. We don't want to see the ribbon chart, so I'm going to just hide the ribbon chart as well. When the month is enabled, these are the visuals that we want to see. So I'm going to update this. Then for the disable, month disable, when the month is being disabled, the only buttons that we want to see is the quarter that is enabled, and of course the month that is being disabled. And of course too, we also want to see the quarter. Yes, this is what we want to see when the month is disabled. I'm going to update this information. When our quarter is enabled, we actually don't want to see this, and we want to see the quarter enabled button and the month disabled button. So I'm going to update this. And when our quarter is equally disabled, that's when the quarter button is not selected. We want to see the month button showing. We don't want to see the quarter button enabled button showing. We want to see the quarter that is unselected, and we also don't want to see this month disabled button. And also, because the quarter is being selected at the moment, we don't want to see the month showing. That's the line chart. We don't want to see it showing. So that is it for the quarter that is being disabled. No, for the quarter that is being disabled, we want to see the line charts. We don't want to see the ribbon chart showing. So I'm going to turn off the ribbon chart and bring in the line chart. Then I'm going to update this. So after updating that, let's try and format this button. So months enabled. So let's go to months disabled. So for our months disabled button, so the bookmark should take us to months enabled. Then when we get to our quarter disabled button here, our quarter disabled button, I'm going to select this button and we'll give it, so this quarter disabled button should take us to our quarter enabled button. So we're going to see it in action and see if what we've done is correct. So if I click here, it should show, because we are clicking quarter, it should show the ribbon chart, and the month of course will now show as disabled. If I click the month should show the line chart and also show the quarter as being disabled. So basically that is how our bookmarks should appear. So right now I'll quickly create a bookmark for overview. We'll come back to this particular one later, but let me create it as of now. So bookmark for overview is going to show, for our overview for now, we want it to show that the quarter is enabled. We want it to show that the quarter is enabled and the line chart is actually disabled. So when the quarter is enabled, we want to see the quarter enabled button. We don't want to see this one, and we also want to turn off the month enabled button and bring in this. So this is what should show normally on our visual. So let's click to update this. So we will need to actually arrange this later. So let me bring it up here. Okay, so basically that is what our bookmark should do. That's what our bookmark should do. If I select this month, it should take me to the new month. So I'm just going to readjust this month as well. And if I select quarter, it should take me to the ribbon chart. That is what our bookmark is going to do. The next visual we are going to create here is the donut chart. For the donut chart, we want to show the original sales contribution. So we're going to bring in this donut chart here, and I'm going to readjust it to this point. Let me just bring it to this point. So for this donut chart, we're going to add the total sales in the value section, and the region will come into the legend section. That is how our donut chart should look like. So we're going to format this donut chart as well. For the title, you can change the title to regional sales contribution. So I'm going to change this title. I'll say regional sales contribution. So for now, I'll just go over to the slices. So basically, I want to change the waist to this color. Okay, so that's perfect. And the next thing I want to do for this donut chart is to change the detail labels. I want to show only the percentage value, the percent of total. I don't want to show all the values. So from this legend here, you can equally see which region is which. Then for the legend, I can decide to remove the title, because here we can see that it's regional sales contribution. Then I'll come over to size and style and then remove the background. So removing this background is going to allow me place this donut chart the way I want it to show on this. Remember, the other outer parts that you're seeing came in with my original background. So when you're creating your backgrounds, you can add shapes that will help beautify your report, but also make sure not to add so much so it doesn't make your report look clumsy. So right here in the slices, I'm going to just reduce the padding a little, the spacing rather. I'm going to increase the spacing. So increasing the spacing is just going to increase the innermost part of the donut chart, and this is what our donut chart should look like. I'm going to readjust it here and then place it nicely on the background. So basically this is what our donut chart looks like. So the next chart we are going to create is a matrix chart. So this matrix chart is going to show us the product sales by month. So each of these products, we are going to visualize it by month. I'm going to bring in this matrix chart right here, and I'm going to quickly align it to this point. So for the rows of the matrix chart will be the product. We want our product to be the rows, and for the columns, you want the columns to be the month. So I'm going to open the calendar table and bring in the month name for the columns, and then I'm going to collapse this and bring in total sales from measures table to the values. So basically this is how we want our metrics table to look like. Then we are going to go ahead and format this matrix table. We'll come over to layout and style presets, and we'll change the default to minimal. This is what we wanted to show, and we also want it to show as tabular layout. So that is it for our layout. And the next thing we're going to do for our horizontal grid lines, so for this particular grid here, I'm just going to increase the width to 10. So we're going to increase that width to 10, and I'm going to change the color as well. So that is the color I want to show on the width. And the next thing I would want to do is to also change the padding. So I'll come to size and style, and for the padding here I will increase it. So I'll come to this particular, the upper padding, I'll give it 10 pixels. I'll give this one 10 pixels. I'll give this 19, and I'm going to give this 17. So as you are changing your padding, you can see the changes in your table, so you'll be able to format it just the way you want it to look. Then once I'm done with the padding, I'm going to remove the background of the table because we don't need it. We already have a background there. So I'm going to remove the background of that particular table. The way the total sales is showing, I want it to show in millions. So what I will do is I'll come to specific column. So for this specific column right here, I want to select, for total sales, we want to give it the display unit. The display unit should show in millions. We don't want it to show all the values like that. We want to show display unit in millions. So after changing that, I want to remove the column subtotal, and I also want to remove the row subtotals. I don't need those subtotals. Then for my column header values, I can decide to give it 12 for my column header values, and I'll just scroll down to check for any other formatting that I need to do with this column header values. So for the values here, we can also check that the values are showing appropriately the way it should. So I can change this to 12 as well. So I'm going to come back to this grid section, and we want to reduce the border. So we can't change the border, but we can actually change the color. So I'm just going to change the color of this particular border. That's what I wanted to show. We don't want the border to show that way, or you can just increase the color just to show a slight demarcation. So the next thing we're going to do is to give the title to this particular visual, and I'm going to give the title, so the title will be product sales by month, because we are looking at the product sales. After that, the next thing I will do is to go to the cell element. We want to format the background of this cell element. So this is for the cell element section under the total sales. I'm going to turn on the background. So it's giving me a color already, but I want to change that color. So for this color, we want to change it to this particular color, and the lowest value should give us white, and I'm going to click this. So basically you can decide to increase the color hue or shade that you are using. So I can leave it at this one, or maybe just give it any other color I want to. So this is how our matrix table shows. So the way this matrix works now, with these colors that we've added to the background, the color that is slightly darker tells you that that particular value is a very high value, and the ones that are showing white background is telling you that those ones are very low value. So this table, you can actually scroll the table to look at the sales, to look at the product sales across each of the months. Okay, so basically this is what that table should show. The next visual we are going to create is the bar chart. So we're quickly going to insert this bar chart, and the bar chart is going to carry the top 10 locations. Okay, so by the top 10 locations, I'm going to insert total sales on the bar chart, and of course we are going to use states. So I just remembered something. Before we use the states, let me give the data category as state. So I'm going to select here state or province, So you see it has like a world symbol close to it. So for the city, I'm also going to change the data category to city. So that's what I want to do before I proceed to creating these top 10 locations. So here is my bar chart. I'm going to place this bar chart here, and I'm going to bring in the state. So this is the state that we have. So right now I'll come over to my filter pane, and on this filter pane I'll select the state, and I'll also select it because we want the top 10. I'm going to type top 10, and the top 10 is by sales. So I'm going to add this total sales there and apply the filter. So it's going to give us the top 10 states by sales. So I'm going to just turn this, just close the filter for a while, so I'll be able to format this particular bar chart. For the title, I'll give it top 10 locations. So that's it for the title. I can decide to remove the grid lines that is there. So I'm going to remove those grid lines. And also for the x-axis, I'm going to remove the title and the values as well. This is because I will include a data label for this. I'm going to include a data label for this. So I'll bring in a data label, and that is what my data label should show. So these are the top 10 locations for this particular data. Then for, okay, I need to remove the title of the state as well. So I'll go to my y-axis and remove the title because the state is already showing. So that is it for the top 10 locations. And the next thing we're going to create is a map visual. So this map visual, we're going to bring in a shape map here. And on this shape map, I'll just readjust it and place it directly here too. So we're going to look at the sales by each of the states. This time around, it's going to show for all of the states, while the bar chart is showing for the top 10 locations. So I'll come to the fill color. I want to change this gradient color. I want to change it to this particular color. This is how I want the map to show. I will say total sales by state. So the next thing we're going to create now is a slicer. Then I'm going to select the new slicer button. So for this slicer, I'm going to bring in the region. So I'll bring region right here on this slicer, and here I'll just come to the format pane and click on the layout. So on this layout, we want the maximum cuts shown to be 5 because we have 5 regions in this data. So I want the maximum cuts shown to be 5, and I want the column to be 1. So everything should be aligned properly. I'll just bring it down to this point. I just want to rearrange it and make it fit into the background that we have already. So I'll just rearrange it this way. So for the title, I'm going to type select region. So that is it for the title, and we'll come over to the card. So for the color value, I want to place the color value in the middle. So I'm going to align it horizontally to the middle. Then for the card, which is the button rather, so on the buttons, I'm going to turn off the border, and we're going to add a fill color to these particular buttons. So our color is going to be a conditional formatting. So this conditional formatting, we want to base this value on the total sales. So we want the region slicer to show based on their total sales. So I'm going to select total sales, and we want a gradient actually. So I'm going to select this as the total sales. So this is the color, and I click here. So right now you can see that it is showing based on the total sales. So what this tells you is that West has the highest total sales in all of the regions. The West region actually has the highest total sales. So I can also decide to maybe sort it in descending order. So the way this is sorted in alphabetical order, because for a slicer there is no option for you to sort based on what you've placed as a conditional formatting. But just looking at the colors, you know that the West region has the highest sales, followed by the Northeast, Southeast, and all of that. But if you now decide to select this particular slicer is going to filter this report except you edit your interactions. So that is it for our slicer at the moment. The next slicer we're going to create is a year slicer. So how do we do this? We're going to still use a new slicer to create this year. So I'm going to bring it here, and then we'll go to our calendar table. In our calendar table, I'm going to select year. So we have two buttons now. I'll go to layout to check and make sure that everything is showing. So we want the maximum card to be 2 and the column shown should be 1. Then I'm going to change the shape. So for the shape, we want it to have a rounded rectangle. So this rounded rectangle, we want it to have 50% of the rounded corners. I think we'll have to adjust it a little bit. Okay, for this, I think yes, this is okay. Or we can just make it 25 pixel so it stays in the middle. So the next thing I'm going to do is for the callout values. The callout values, I'm going to just quickly bring it to the center. So this is how the callout values would be in the center. And the next thing I am going to do for the button is going to give it a border. This border, we're going to change the border color to one of the colors in our data, and of course I'm going to turn off the fill color for these particular buttons. Then for the title, I'm going to align it to the center. So for this button now, we'll also quickly format one more thing for this button. So we'll come over to the button section. As a default state, this is what it should look like, but when it is selected, we want to change the value. So when this button is selected, we want to give it a fill color, and the fill color should be this color, so that it shows that this particular button is being selected. That should be the fill color. And the text color as well, we want to change the text color when the button is selected. So let me scroll up. So the callout values, when it's selected, it should be white. The callout values, when it's being selected, it should be white. Okay, and that is it. So let's see how this works. If I select this is what it should show. If I select 2020, it should show, the button should change and show that it is being selected. If I select 2021, it should show the same thing. Then I can just deselect, or as when it is not selected, this is how it should be displayed. Next thing we are going to do is to add key information to this particular report. So the next, what we're going to do quickly is to create a view insight button. Okay, what we're going to do is to create a button. Yes, so I'm going to bring in clear all slicers button, and I'll bring in here. So there's an automatic clear all slicers button that you can use. So for this clear all slicers, you can just format it. So this button has an icon. If you decide to turn on the icon, that is what the icon should show, and it's showing an eraser sign, which shows you that you can use it to clear your slicers. So that is the eraser sign. I can remove the text for this particular button, so I'll reduce it a bit. So if you want to allow the text to be there to show that it is a clear all slicers button, you can go ahead and do that as well. So I'm going to turn off the border for this particular button. So this button, if a slicer was selected or any filter was selected, you can use it to clear the entire slicers. So right here, I'm also going to, for this button style, I'm going to remove the border. Yes, I want to remove the border for that button style, and this is what it should show. This eraser symbol should show. So the next thing we're going to create a date slicer. So this date slicer is just to show you the duration of the data. So I'm going to add dates here. I'm going to remove the slider, and of course I'm also going to remove the slicer header. So I'll give it a title. The title will be showing data for. So this should be the title. I'm going to just change this to 11, and once I change that, I'll bring it to the center. Okay, so I'm going to turn off this slider. So right here on this slider now, I will have to turn off the background. I don't want the background to show. Then after that, for the values, I'm going to increase the values a little bit. I'm going to increase the font size. So I'll come to the values and then choose 12. So that is going to be for the values. So basically this is what our slicer should show. It's just showing us the duration of our data. So it means that this particular data set is showing for January 1st 2020 to December 31st 2021. So the next thing, of course, you can always increase your values as much as you want. The next thing I'm going to create is an inside button. So I'm going to create a blank button here. So we're just going to use we're going to format it to look the same with other button. So the shape is going to be a rounded rectangle, and this rounded rectangle, I want it to have 50% rounded corners. Okay, so that is it for this button. Then I'm going to format it further by giving it a text. So I'm going to give it this text, view insights, and I'm also going to give it a border color. This border color, I want to reduce the border, so I'm going to give it this particular color. So this is what the view insights button should look like. Okay, so that is what it should look like. Let me reduce it a bit. So for this view inside button, we are also going to create a bookmark for this view inside button. So we'll quickly create it at once. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to duplicate this button. Once I duplicate this button, I'll change the text for this duplicate button to clear insights. So this is what should show. For this clear insights, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it a fill color. So I'll scroll down here to give it, let me collapse this. I'm going to give it a fill color, and this color is going to be this blue color. So I'll turn off the transparency, and of course the text is going to have a white color. So if I give the text white color, this is what clear insight shows, and it's basically the same button. So it's just going to be here, and we're going to create bookmarks to it. But before we create the bookmarks, what I want to do is to add a text box. So this text box is going to hold some of the insights for our data. I've pasted the summary of this particular report. So I'm going to change the background. I'm going to change this background to this color. Let's see what it gives us. Okay, so we can make it to this one. So this is perfect for me. You can adjust your own to your own preference. I'm going to bring this text box and actually place it right here. So this is where we want our insights to show. So I'm going to place the text box right there. So for this text box, I'm just going to readjust this font size of my text. So I'm readjusting the font size of the text, and this is what it should show. So this is basically what the inside should show. Then we are going to go ahead and create a bookmark for this. So I'll bring in the bookmark panes and the selection pane. So right here we have this particular button. If I select this button, it's showing me the button, so I can quickly change the name. So I'll double click and call it Clear Insights. Then this other button is the one that we want to change for View Insights. So basically this is what we want this button to do. I'm going to add a bookmark for View Insights. So the bookmark will show View Insights. So when we want to view insights, we only want to view this text box. Okay, let me change the name of the text box as well, so we understand what we're doing. So that is the insight, the text box that shows. Insight is basically the summary of some of the metrics on this report. So right here we have a view insight button, a view insight bookmap, and of course a view insight button. So I'm going to add another bookmap that says Clay Insights. We're just going to use the same logic we used initially when we were creating buttons for quarter and month. So this is Clay Insights. With that, I'm going to come to view insights bookmap now, and under this view insights bookmap, I don't want to see the view insights. I want to see only the Clay Insights and the insights table. Then when I'm going to quickly update this, then for the Clay Insight, once the Clay Insight is selected, I want the Clay Insight to go off and the view insight should come back on. So this is what should show. Our Clay Insights bookmap should take us to Clay Insights, while our view insights button should take us to view insights. So let's see how this works. So normally if we click to view insight, it should show us this summary, and if we click to Clay Insight, this is the summary it should show us. And for our overview, in the overview, I'm going to turn on the selection pane. So for the overview, we don't want to see the insight, and we also don't want to see the Clay Insights button in our overview. So I'm going to update this overview, and this is how it should look like. So I'm going to collapse this button. So basically, if I click to view insight, it should show me the summary of this report, and if I also click to Clay Insight, it should turn it right off. So we're done with the first page of this report, and this is what we have. So the next thing we're going to do is to quickly duplicate this particular page. So I can give this page an overview. I can give it a page name overview. Then I'm going to duplicate this. So when we duplicate this particular page, we need to delete some of these visuals that are not important to us. So right now, I'm just going to select this entire visual because this is for the first page, and I'm going to delete everything off. So when I delete everything off, I'll go ahead and import another background for this second page. So the background, I'm going to bring in a background now. So it's going to be the second page background that I created, and I'm also going to fit in this background to this page. So this is what this particular page looks like. So what we are going to create is we're going to create 3 donut charts first off for our sales method. 3 donut charts. So I'm going to create these 3 donut charts. The donut chart will have total sales, and of course is going to have the sales method as well. So I'm going to select the sales method. So this is it for our sales method. I'll quickly come over to my slices, and for this in-store, I want to change the color. So for the online, I want to change it to this color. This is the colors I want for my slices. So I'll quickly readjust it. Here. And of course, I'm going to replicate this for the other metrics that I want to create for the sales method. So what I will do is to copy and paste here. So these are the 3 donut charts that we want to create. So this is it. So for the second one, we have to change the total sales because we want to show the total profit. We want to show the total profit for each of those sales method. Then for the last one, we want to show the units sold for each of those sales method. So this is how we want this particular point to show. So this sales method, we are trying to analyze how much sales and the profits we've been able to make from the 3 different sales channels that we have available in this data set. The next thing we are going to create is a sales by product bar chart. In this bar chart, I'm going to select this bar chart first, and I'm going to place it right here. So we want to do a sales by product. So we're going to bring in total sales, and we are also going to bring in product. So this is how it should look like. So we're going to go ahead and start formatting. I'll turn off the title because I don't want the title to display. And also for the x-axis, I also don't want the title to display because for the x-axis, I'm going to add data labels to it. So we have to create a measure in order to format this particular visual folder. We have to create a measure. So I'm going to click on the measures table and click new measure. So I want to create a new measure. The measure, we're going to call it label. So it's just a very simple measure. Label equals to 0. We want to use it and manipulate this bar chart. So that's what the measure should show. So with that particular measure now, I'll come back to format this particular bar chart. So right here, first off, I'm going to bring this measure. I'm going to bring this measure to our x-axis. So I'm going to bring it here. I just want the label to be on top and the x-axis here. So that is how it should look like. So right here, I'll now come over to the label section, data label section. So for this data label section, I'm going to click the label. So for that particular label, what I'll do is I'll come over to the value. I'll come over to this value for that particular detail label and then select it. What I want to show is the product because we are looking at the product sales. So I'll select the product I'll select the products from the product table and that automatically shows us the products for each of this. So what we can now do after formatting that, what we can now do is to turn off the values for the x-axis. Sorry, is to turn off the values for the y-axis because we now have a data label placed on top of the bars for us. Then I'll just quickly go to the bars and change the colors of the bars. So for here, I'm going to change the total sales color. So for here, I'm going to change the total sales color, and this is what I want the total sales color to look like. We're going to sort this axis based on total sales, okay? And this is what we should have. So after formatting that, I'll quickly come to my legend. I'll quickly come to my legend and then turn it off. I don't want the legend to show, neither do I want the title to show. So this is what we have as our bar chart. So I'll also change the title because the title of this bar chart is sales by product. So we're going to say sales by product. That's the title of the bar chart. And the next thing we're going to create is the column chart. So for this column chart, I'm just going to bring in a clustered column chart and I'm going to readjust and place it right here for this particular column chart. So I'm going to readjust this. Once I readjust this, so what we're going to look at is the average sales by unit per product. So because we want to look at the average sales, we have to create a measure for the average sales per unit, and it's actually a very simple measure. So what I'm going to do is to quickly create this measure. We'll call it average sales per unit. So we're going to use the divide function and we're going to divide the total sales by the unit sold. So that's how we can get average sales per unit, total sales by divided by the unit sold. Then I'm going to close this bracket. So if I bring in the average sales per unit and also bring in the product, this is what we should have. But we also, another thing we want to do is we want to format these bars to show for different colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one quick measure to do that. So I'll select on the measures table again and I'm going to select the new measure. So this new measure will be called average sales product color. So we want to format the color to use in our conditional formatting, average product color. Average product color will start by using a variable. We want to create a variable of average sales. A variable of average sales. So this is going to, we are going to use our max x function. At the table we want to use for max x function, we're going to use the all function and we're going to use the product. We want to use the product column from the product table. Then I'm going to close that particular bracket and put a comma. Once I put a comma there, I'm going to press to enter. I want to write the code in the other line. So I'm going to bring in the average sales per unit that we have already. then I'm going to close the bracket. Once I close the bracket, I'll press enter. I'll backspace a little and then return this particular variable. So this return function, we're going to use an if function, and the function is the average sales if the average sales per unit is equal to this average sales variable that we have, it should give us a particular column. So I'm going to use the X code of that column. So I'll type 5347 CE. That's the X code that we want. Remember to enclose it in a double quote as well to avoid errors. Then the result, if the answer is false, it should give us another column. So I'm going to type E7 EBEF. So this is it for our measure, and I'm going to press enter. So immediately I press enter, our measure has been created. So what I want to use this measure for is I'll click on this column chart. So I'm coming over to the columns to format this column. So I'm going to click on this FX to show the conditional formatting dialog box. So for the format style, we want to select a field value, and we want to base this value on the measure we just created, which is average sales product column. I'm going to select it and then click OK. So once I click OK, you can see that it's already formatted. So that means that that particular measure has worked. It's only showing us the only bar that has a color is the average sales pay, the highest average sales pay unit by product. Okay, so that is it for this particular column. I can also decide to, of course, I'll definitely have to remove the title. I don't need the title in the X axis. I also don't need the title in the Y axis as well. So I'm going to remove them. The next visual we're going to create is actually a decomposition tree. We want to see how the retailers are performing. Remember, we have retailers in this data set. So each of these retailers, they sell these different sports products. So we want to see how they are performing. So we are going to use a decomposition tree, and we're going to select this decomposition tree. I'm going to place this right here, and this the composition tree, we want to analyze the data by total sales. So I'll bring in the total sales to analyze the data. We want to explain this data by retailer. We also want to explain by the sales method. We want to explain by the sales method, and we also want to explain by the product. So this is how it should be. I'm going to expand this decomposition tree. I'm going to expand this. So for this decomposition tree, this is the first column that shows which is the total sales. This is what we are trying to analyze. Then I'm going to click on this plus icon. You can decide to show the highest value, to analyze by the highest value or lowest value. But here I specifically want to explain by retailer, sales method, and product. So I'm going to first of all select the retailer. So of course, all the retailers will definitely show you. We see that waist gear retailer is the one that has the highest total sales from these columns. So let's say we want to keep expanding or to split this data by waist gear. So we'll now decide to check the sales method. So for this sales method, we see that in store, that people that bought in store from waist gear retailer actually bought the most. And then if we decide to also split the in store to check the product, we'll see that Main Street Footwear, people that walked into the store of Westgate bought Main Street Footwear a lot. If you also want to split the data by another particular retailer, you can just select the retailer. Like here, if I select Foot Locker, you can see it has splitted this data for Foot Locker by its sales method and the product. So that is how the decomposition tree works. I can just quickly come here. Remember, you can also change the colors if you want to. I'll quickly come and give it a title, and the title will be Retailer Sales Decomposition. One more thing we need to do is for us to add a navigator to this particular box. We should have added it before duplicating, but I just remembered. So we're going to add it right away. And what we're going to do, we're going to insert an image. So I'll click on insert because we need images to do this. So I'll click on that particular one. I'll click to open. So I'll just readjust this image and bring it right here. So this is where the image should be. I'm going to bring in the second image at once. So I'll click on the right arrow and insert it. So once I insert this particular image, I'll also bring it to this point. So this arrow keys is going to help us navigate to the different report page. So right now, I'm also going to open a bookmap. So quickly, we're going to open a bookmap. And this second bookmap, I'm going to call it sales analysis. Remember, we have an overview page already. Sales analysis. So I'm going to select this right arrow and we want to give it an action. So on this right arrow, we want to give it a page navigation. So this page navigation, it should navigate us to sales analysis. Okay. So after creating these buttons, these images, I'm just going to select both of them. I'll select the two image. I want to copy it and paste exactly where it should be on the other page as well. So this is the other page. So on this other page, if I click here, the navigation should take me back to overview. This is how it should work. So if I'm on the second page, if I click on this particular button, it should take me to the first page. And if I'm on the first page, if I click on this button, it should take me to the second page. And of course, on any of those pages, I can click to view my insights. Once I click to view insights, I can also click to play insights. So I'm just going to close all of this. So basically, this is how you can create a product sales analysis report in Power BI. In my next video, I'll be showing you how to configure row level security using this same data set. Thank you so much guys for watching this video. I hope you learned something from it. Thank you.